afternoon, Andre. It's
Good
good.
afternoon, Dewald.
It's good to have you
Louise.
here. You are used to being in front of our cameras. It's a little bit different.
Fortunately, unfortunately, yes.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Yes. Thanks for joining us, and please introduce yourself and tell us what your job is and what area of the country you're from, please.
Okay, my name is Andre Komrink, and I'm currently, for the last, from 2021, of employment with CRI as extension manager for the Eastern Cape citrus production regions, which it includes the Gamtoos River Valley, Sundays River Valley, and the Eastern Cape Midlands, which is also known as the Cat River Valley. So I'm in the three valleys of the Eastern Cape.
Andre, so we are here at the CRI
Workshops.
and I know that we know that you're going to be doing a presentation. So this is an opportunity for you to practice a little bit your presentation, which I'm sure you know backward. But just tell us about your presentation and what you'll be talking about.
So what will you be speaking about at the workshop?
Yeah, so with this, we have to bring together, there's a component of IPM is something that we're really driving at this stage. I think this is the right time. We're losing products, the markets are getting tighter. There's lots of issues with product tolerance, withdrawals, residues. So we just have to bring all of that together, and we feel strongly, and I've felt strongly for many, many years, as long as I've been working in citrus, that IPM, integrated pest control, and now we're saying integrated pest and disease control, is key in this. You know, we can't just keep on spraying and putting yourself in a chemical sort of treadmill is what we sometimes call it. And so IPM is the way forward in terms of what we feel strongly that you don't put yourself in that position. So I have to bring that a little bit together. So a little bit of the disease management, a little bit of residue management, and pest management, and in a meaningful way that the farmer can understand. And then it's almost like it's a three-pronged approach. You know, in terms of in IPM we should have a big biological control component, and then there's a cultural control, and then there's chemical control. And the chemical control, really, you want to be like almost like the smallest component, almost really spray chemistry where it's needed, not unnecessarily sprayed. Lots of these times these things are disruptive. So that is a focus, bringing all of that together. So in my presentation, I consciously focus more on the biological and the cultural control and less on chemical control, because we feel strongly that with those first two options, you really get yourself in the long term, maybe not short term. In the long term, you get yourself in a position where you're not at risk of falling into a chemical treadmill and just spraying for pests the whole time. You know.
So if I understand the terminology correct, biological control meaning is that you put out little parasitoid insects in the orchards that help you control the pests and diseases. And cultural control is that you fix the culture of the people to start using that. Am I correct in saying that?
You are, in a way. And I'm laughing now because, I mean, that's also, I spoke to somebody the other day. It says, that we're pushing this IPM thing, and it was actually a grower I was speaking to. He says, what if I tell you tomorrow that these products that you are including in your program is not available to us anymore? It's restricted by the local registrar. You can't use it on your farm. Then what are you going to do if you have to now jump into, let's say, the IPM?
You're forced to do it.
Yeah, you're forced to do it. And then the answer often comes through, and in this case it was the case, now then we'll just release goggatjies, and more scientific term was be augmentation releases. So you augment put the natural parasitoids and predators in there, and they do the job. And it is a component of it, but it's not cheap, and it's not just releasing. You have to control ants. There's many aspects that play a role there, and unfortunately, it's not just that. I think what we also trying to drive is, it's not so much that you have to release these parasitoids or the natural enemies. We must stop killing them because they already there. So it's not necessarily a release then, it's more conservation as well that we feel strongly about. So basically, in many areas, certainly the Sundays River for many, many years, we were known as an area where these natural parasitoids and predators thrive, if you take care of them. And we must just stop killing them. And in terms of what you're saying about cultural, I'm trying hard for many years to change the culture from, treating a symptom rather than treating the cause. So many times our pest problems with secondary pests or minor pests is self-inflicted. So it often stems from harsh stripicides. Strips is our main pest in citrus in most of the areas, and then you disrupt, and then you get a repercussion pest, and then you have to spray for that and spray for that and spray for that, and that's sort of the treadmill. But cultural, what I'm focusing on my talk isn't changing the culture of the farmer. I'm talking about farm cultural practices, meaning you will have to spray chemicals, but your spray machine is that we did the calibration video with is one of the most important pieces of equipment on your farm. You need to get this chemistry that you're using, get it onto the target. I mean, that's very important. If you miss the target, then you don't get the control. So the focus on having those machines well calibrated, well maintained, being able to do the best job they can. So that is part of cultural. That's also, I feel strongly that sometimes or often the lack of control or lack of efficacy of a spray is not due to the product being ineffective. It's due to you missing the target. You're not getting the product to the pest, and so that is a farm cultural practice, but also other cultural practice like controlling ants, controlling your weeds in your orchard that can aid in disease control, your sanitation. If your orchards are, I don't want no weeds there, but your weeds must be under control so you can actually pick up your fruit that falls from the tree.
Yeah, but just orchard sanitation is a very, very basic thing. We get in a lot of orchards, and sometimes, especially if we've got to do video projects or photos or whatever, you really need to clean out a row to get the shots that you need.
Yeah. So I want the weeds there. I mean, it's certainly the worst thing that I see in orchards is bare ground. I mean, we obviously don't want that either, but you can't have weeds too long or at certain times that you can't pick up your fruit, because unfortunately we do have quite a few phytosanitary sort of issues that we have to contend with to get our fruit into the markets, and the baseline of something like, or the most important base start point for something like FCM control, false codling moth, and also fruit fly is, just to name a few, is sanitation. You can do the sprays, you can do all the other. If you don't do proper sanitation, you can have holes in your approach, and you're not going to get the best results.
Yeah, because if that fruit falls to the ground, the larvae has got a quicker way to the ground where it pupates.
Yeah.
So the sooner you remove the fruit, bury it, or destroy it, you're removing the larvae.
So weed control plays a role there. And then in terms of ants, you want to keep, ants are a good thing. It's not a pest. I mean, if it's in the ground, that's where they do good. But if they get into a tree, they can sometimes cause a few issues there. So we're not trying to kill them, we're just trying to keep them out of the tree. And if you have control measures where you stop the tree or the ant from getting into the tree, but it has access because of something you do to the trunk or a bait that you apply there, but the ant can have access through weeds growing into the canopy. Things like that, it's sometimes overlooked. People tend to focus on that chemical component, and I'm joking. I say we want to kill things dead with chemistry, and we're saying there's other ways. In terms of, I also mentioned that in my talk. I'll just bring it in quickly. Is we want to produce clean fruit. The first slide actually shows, in my opinion, what is the aim with your spray program, and I'm saying there that it is, in the long term, you want to produce the best quality fruit that is market compliant in the most sustainable way possible. That would be the key. And people forget, in citrus, if you prune a tree well, and you set more fruit on the inside, the main pest I'm talking about, thrips, doesn't particularly enjoy eating or feeding on inside fruit. So by setting more inside fruit through by means of pruning, you're going to get better quality fruit. So sometimes it's things that we're trying to focus on the other aspects of getting clean fruit,
But then
not from spraying alone.
But also, if you set more inside fruit, then your trees need to be pruned so that the chemical you do apply gets inside, and also sunlight.
Yeah. So that part of that where I cover there is the aspect of pruning. Opening up your tree, opening up your roads for access for your spray machine, opening up windows so you can get inside the tree for the pests that reside inside the canopy that are difficult to reach with the spray machine. I sum it up almost like I don't think we have even the best spray machine, well calibrated, well maintained. If you have to go with that machine in an unpruned tree, then it's going to be tough. So I'm saying, like, we don't have the idle machine at this stage that we use, and there's various sort of different ones that gets used, but we don't have the idle one. So if your machine can't do the job, then you can do it with a pruning shear. You can shape your tree to suit your spray machine, where people tend to think, no, I must get a better spray machine, which is costly. Those things are quite expensive nowadays. So yeah, with a simple aspect like getting in there, pruning, and then you get the added benefit of setting inside fruit, cleaner fruit. So the list of pruning is very long. The negatives about pruning would be it's labor intensive, and that some can consider it to be expensive. But I think Hannes Bester, our National Extension Manager, has got a short sentence where he says, we mustn't see pruning as a cost factor on the farm. We must see it as an income generator, which certainly it is. Inside fruit, clean fruit, inside fruit, generally bigger fruit. Wind damage, difficult to get wind damage on the inside fruit. So inside fruit, in my opinion, often is class 1 fruit.
Andre, you mentioned that the spray machine is one of the most important pieces of equipment on the farm. And it's quite a technical thing how to calibrate it. I mean, we were there when you showed us how. It's a definitely higher grade to get that right. And
Yet he showed us in the standard grade version of how to do it.
He showed us. But what I'm interested in is to know, okay, as you say, it's expensive. You've got to do it right. And what are some of the pitfalls that people make mistakes with preparing their chemicals for spray?
But to add on to that, is there anybody double checking that these things are calibrated? So is any of the regulatory bodies, are you guys doing spot checks to see if guys' machines are calibrated?
How does that work?
If they've done a calibration in the season?
20 questions, all in one.
Yeah, I think it does come up in the Global Gap audits. I'm not sure which other ones. There's quite a few audits that the growers have got to comply with.
Well, Global Gap is a pretty universal, good agricultural practice audit.
It's probably one of the main ones that everybody has to sort of, you have to have that certificate. So I think, I don't know about other areas, sometimes do you have a certification body that does it for you? In the area that I function, the Sunrise River, basically Eastern Cape, at this stage, it's not really. You as a grower can do it. You must just show your process. And I think this is maybe where the process, there's different processes. I showed you one that worked for me. There's various ways to calibrate a spray machine, especially when it comes to the delivery part that we did last in that video. So it often gets done. I think they accept if it gets done by somebody that is, of course, accredited, like most of the chemical agents, or maybe a consultant that you use on the farm, technical person. They considered us as agronomists for Sunrise River and the agronomy department as qualified. I don't have a spectacular qualification, but they considered that to be good enough, so we could do it. But I don't know of specific certification companies that do it. And that is where I sometimes see the problem. There's often, let's be careful what I say now, that people just want that certificate because Global Gap's going to ask it, And I'm trying to get the message across that that shouldn't be the case. You should maintain that machine. You should know exactly what you're applying, what is your ground speed, what is your delivery, what nozzle types are you using, what are you trying, the outside cover, inside cover. That machine, I think I have a short sentence in there saying maintain it well, or focus on this process. So don't just do it for the sake of getting a certificate. That thing is...
It's costing
yeah,
you
and
a
I
lot
think
of
in
money.
that calibration video I mentioned also, over application is not necessarily good. You can get bad results because you often get a lot of runoff or your tree is not pruned properly. And under application means that you can also miss the target, and that means that you have to spray more frequently. So all of these things affect your efficacy of your product and your bottom line. It's going to cost you. Under application is going to cost you, and over application is also
Yeah.
going to cost you. So it's short message: maintain that machine well. I mean, that should be stored in a proper place. You should maybe take your Mercedes-Benz out and park that machine in there and maintain it and look after that thing. That is sort of I can put it simply, a good practice if the farmers were to adopt that.
Apart from pruning, what other things can growers do to improve the spray? Even before they start, like even before season or whatever, when they must start spraying, go into orchards, like clean out rocks in the rows, for instance. And what kind of practices are there that might not cost them an arm and a leg before the spray season starts?
Yeah, so I've tried to build in sort of a sequence of things that you can do that are not involved, or that doesn't focus on the chemical spraying itself, as I explained. So obviously those are cultural practices, opening your trees. The other things that we feel strongly in terms of an IPM approach or an integrated approach is doing the right thing at the right time. So getting the timing right. Many of our pests is you have to spray at a specific time. So and to sum it up, we talk about scouting or monitoring. That I think that's that is, apart from the cultural preparing your orchard, making sure you can get in, is to do the right things at the right time. And you base that on monitoring data, and I say it's like it's an educated decision that you make that based on what are you seeing in the orchard. So before the season starts, I do have a point that I always sort of implement that worked well for us is you just walk in your orchards. You take a stroll through your orchards and you look at your spring flush. So it's before the fruit is set on the tree. And if your spring flush looks nice and clean and shiny and not distorted, then you're okay. If it's a couple of weeks leading up to when your fruitlets are now going to be set on the tree after blossom. But you walk around and you can see a bit of thrips damage on the flush because that's where you can easily see it. Without the scout glass or special eyesight, it's easy to spot. Or you see some mealybug damage on the leaves, and it tells you a story. Then you can prepare your program in terms of, I'm seeing a bit of thrips damage on my flush here. I must maybe make sure that my early interventions is suitable for this pressure that's building up. Mealybug is one of our main pests. I mean, Sean talks about the big five. Mealybug is one of them. Seeing the symptoms on the leaves here. I know there was a problem last year, so this is also historical data. And then you make a decision. For this particular orchard, I need to focus on some mealybug management, and then through the researchers and other specific pest focus, it's always better to do early intervention than late corrective sort of sprays. To sum it up simply in my head, as not a very technical person, is anything is better to control at low levels.
Yes.
So something like that, and then just your monitoring data. Don't just monitor and forget about that. Keep records. We learn from it. Enables you to do immediate decision making. So I've exceeded the threshold, I spray something, or there's a corrective action that I'm going to do, or intervention, or I'm looking at trends. If I'm seeing this amount of this pest at this stage in our area, on this orchard, on my farm, the trend it'll grow up to a certain level and then naturally decline. So trends help you in decision making, and then there's also like comparisons between seasons. Last season this was the case. That was the result at the end. This season I'm seeing something similar. What can I expect? And it helps you not necessarily with your spray program, but it can help you in planning. And so monitoring is probably one of the most important aspects. And the challenge here, it's a catch-22. And I say it in the talk as well. For you to implement IPM, there's no calendar spray. There's nothing written down. This is my plan set in stone. I'm going to apply this product in that week, and then 6 weeks later apply another product and mix that in there. No calendar spraying. It must be based on scouting solely. But again, easier said than done, and we understand that that's not possible. So what we're driving at this stage is, as much as possible, try and do that. We understand it's difficult, but wherever you can base your spray on monitoring data or scout information, proper scout information, do that. Don't just plan. But we do have calendar spray, certainly in the Sunrise River Valley. But it mustn't be set in stone. You must
So
be
you have
able
to find the balance there between a calendar spray, which you prefer not to have, and keeping your finger on the pulse and spraying very quickly, reactively to what you see.
Yeah.
got
The calendar spray is many years ago when before we had to manage black spot so intense. We did spray for black spot, but it wasn't as intense as it's. We didn't have to do 5, 6, or 7 sprays on lemons. If somebody talked about calendar spray, that was a swear word. No, what the hell are you talking about? There's no calendar sprays, but nowadays there is. If I had to write a program today for Sunrise River, I'll slot my black spot sprays in first and space them where they must be. Correct timing for the disease that I'm trying to control here, and then you build a program around that. So it is a calendar, but it's only that black spot spray that is sort of at a specific time. The in-between sprays shouldn't be. That should be based on scouting. So it's certainly possible, even with the intensity and the complexities that all the sprays bring nowadays.
Do you have success stories? Maybe one. You don't have to mention a name or who it is or whatever, that took your advice on these kind of things and followed it and saw a remarkable change in his production.
Yeah, I certainly do. When I started in the early 2001 to be exact, in the Sunrise River I think we were called technical advisors at the time. Our technical manager was a grower himself, so he was heading up our agronomy department at SRCC and was farming himself, and he was very much IPM focused. And he practiced what he preached, So he had many successes in the Sunrise River Valley for many, many years. He farmed for, I don't know, it was well over 20, 25, 26 years, if not longer. And he was a technical manager for roughly about that time as well. And I remember to get clean navels produced in the Sunrise River is a challenge. Thrips prefer a navel that cause damage very quickly. And
Now,
I remember times when...
if you say clean, is that damage-free or pest-free?
Yeah, that's a class 1 fruit. It's something that the consumer in supermarket in Germany would targeting that fruit. This thing is completely clean. And that's the rind. There's no blemish. And he won many prizes with SRCC at the end of the season. They gave out prizes to who's a grower with the best packouts on navels. And he got often that prize, with very little chemical intervention. When we do spray chemicals, we're not saying no chemicals. We're talking about the softer IPM-rated products that don't tend to cause repercussion pests. And example there would be, I remember here towards the end, he said to me in the way, he said, Andre, I'm actually proud to say that in 23 of the 25 years or something, I never specifically had to do anything for mealybug control. He never did a specific mealybug control chemical spray on the farm. He did inadvertently. We used a product before the fruit set that was considered as an organophosphate, which could be considered more like a broad spectrum. You know, it has impact on thrips, mealybug. You would do that, but in the rest of the season, that is all he did. And then you would just control his ants, and you would make sure that you make a careful decision of what thrippicides you use, because that is, if I see a spray program and I see your thrippicides use, I can almost in the Sundays read it like a book. You know what's going to potentially happen. So you pick those carefully, control these ants. There's a tendency, all your sap-sucking insects, to sort of take care of them for the honeydew that they produce. And he didn't have that, and his levels of mealybug, he would know. I would scout, the numbers would rise at a certain stage in the season. If I just keep my ants under control and I haven't sprayed disruptive chemicals, it would drop. So a good example there would be for a pest that now often I see 2-3 sprays in a season directed at mealybug control, which this farmer didn't control for over 20 years.
Sure.
You know, red scale is a different story, but it's that sort of thing. You know, thrips is a difficult one. Thrips is
It's a bloody small. You
yeah,
can't
but
keep
it
out
causes major damage quickly. But that is, to me, that's the primary pest. And red scales and mealybug is I wouldn't say secondary pest, but if you spray good program, not disruptive for thrips, which is easier said than done. We don't have enough soft thrippicides available. You don't have to control those or you don't have to go to the lengths and spend time and money and effort on those pests. You know, FCM and black spot is a different sort of thing. But yeah, so that is an example. I mean, Sean Moore mentioned the other day of a farmer, which we spoke, I think it spoke in one of your podcasts about the farmer that was struggling with mealybug somewhere, doing, I don't know, in excess of 5, 6, 7, 8 sprays for mealybug and not being able to get the mealybug under control. And then Sean helped him to say, well, you know, the more you spray, you're disrupting the whole time. So inadvertently, not knowing that he was doing it. And so you mustn't spray more than twice. And the farmer took that advice and he came back and he said, well, thank you very much. You know, so mealybug is not my main problem anymore, which it shouldn't be. Thrips is our main problem. You know, where that is what we should be focusing on from a pest insect side. That is. So there's many other. We've got organic farmers in the Sundays River Valley that can't spray anything, and they diligently don't. They proper SOGA Organics, what they call them, the group. And they concentrate heavily on biological and the cultural aspects. And they have success often. I mean, obviously the fruit cannot be as clean as somebody that uses a lot of the chemical intervention. But, you know, in lighter thrips years, they come through fairly unscathed. And then you have difficult years where you take a few knocks. The problem nowadays, farmers is you have to produce clean fruit at
I think it's
all
also
costs,
because
right?
the mealybug is on the big 5, whatever, pest of concern for a lot of the markets. All the Eastern markets, mealybug, fruit fly, FCM, it's almost those 3. And it's almost as if I can't have it at any cost in my orchard, so we must spray for it. Yet the thrips is not a pest of concern for the overseas market, but it causes the most damage locally.
Yeah, so it's not considered a quarantine or a phytosanitary, but it causes damage fairly quickly. But yeah, mealybug, you know, this is also, as I said, you know, we sometimes tell a grower, do this, and easier said than done, you know. So with mealybug, you don't have to kill every single mealybug in your orchard, but for some markets, unfortunately, you do. So if you do follow IPM approach and you let nature do its job for your mealybug control, you control your ants, you're not spraying disruptive for thrips, and you let the mealybug rise in your area at that trend that peaks there, and naturally it'll come down as we head into the autumn and winter. It'll control it. You'll get it to a level. I think Sean or Luke gives a talk here in this workshop about Luke Cousins about mealybug. You end up with a 5% infestation in that orchard, which is commercially clean. I mean, there's going to be no
But there will
issue,
always be something.
except for a market like, for instance, Korea, that is high focus on mealybug. Then they don't want that one or two in a fruit. So, but for most markets, most of the important markets that we send to, European markets, Middle East, Russia, you can tolerate up to 10-15% on a proper scout. That I would still consider that orchard to be clean. Well, certainly in the Sundays. I'm not going to comment in the north. The situation might be a little bit different. But yeah, we don't have to kill every single pest. There is a threshold, an economic threshold still for some, even for thrips. I still maintain if you can maintain your thrips levels in an orchard at 1 or 2%, you'd never get it to 0 throughout the season. You shouldn't have too much damage, So, but again, there's a tolerance. Every single orchard will have in the Sundays River. I would make that statement. Every single orchard has got a resident population of mealybug that will rise and fall throughout the season. The numbers will go up to damaging levels if you spray disruptive chemicals that we know can disrupt your mealybug complex, or not. So it's they're there. They need to be there because some of the natural parasitoids and predators that I'm talking about feed on them. That is the way of completing their life cycle. So if there's nothing there, not all of the parasitoids can now survive on.
Yeah, they will
let's pick another pest that we're going to survive on. So it's natural. It's a natural biology, a natural way of things in the orchard. So we must just maintain that. If we don't disrupt, I think you can be surprised at what you can get away with.
Very, very interesting to hear that, as far as possible, you can go with watching the natural balance, keeping a close eye on it, getting your cultures right. And if you really have to, then you spray. But there's a lot of other stuff that you can do before you get to spraying.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been very, very interesting.
Yeah.
Much appreciated.
Yeah. So listen to the talk, and then there's a few other aspects as well. Like I said, if they give me a whole session, then knowing myself, I'll drill into detail.
We've been going for 45 minutes. So
Thank you. Very, very interesting. Andre, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity, and we'll build on and see how far we can reach. But IPM is a big focus at this stage, and it's the right time. I think it's long term. Short term decisions are easy to make. Long term is what we should be focusing. We're not farming citrus only till.
Yeah, it's not a cash crop.
Yeah, those trees stand in the ground for quite a while, and I'm sure we want to let this wonderful citrus industry of ours prosper for the next 50, 100 years. I won't be here then, but there'll be people.
Your message will still be. Your message will still
Thanks,
be.
Yeah, we
Andre.
hope so.
Okay.
But thank you.
Pleasure.